Hi, welcome to I Love a Good Story. With me today I have Dylan Brody, humorist, actor, writer, author, comedian, purveyor of words. Dylan,
Lauri.
I want to ask you, okay, you hardly ever, you almost never read. I never see you reading things. You always have it memorized. So my question first is, how do you memorize everything? Because you can talk for half an hour with nothing memorized.
Well, first of all, mostly I just talk about myself. And I am really good at that. It's my favorite topic, and I have a lot of information on it. But it's not just that. There are times that I do read. There are some shows for which I read. There are some shows that require that I read. But I have a theatrical background, so I was memorizing from very early on, and I don't do anything exactly word for word every time.
Okay.
I was a stand-up comic for a lot of years, so you get into the habit of sort of doing this loose leaf format with the jokes and which bit comes where and what hunk goes. So when I'm doing stories, I do pretty much the same thing. It's just that some of the punchlines aren't laugh lines. Some of the punchlines are particularly compelling images or particularly clever turns of phrase that I know I want to get to.
Okay,
So,
do you ever, you're very, very natural. You look, you'll get
well, I
taken.
am an organic construct.
Okay. All right, that was going to be my next question. So you'll change you'll let the audience change you is that because you have when I say change you, I mean, you will not go, you'll have a plan, but the plan may move and morph, but you seem to always come back to your said plan.
I do my best to stay in the moment. I also do my best to be fully prepared. When I was very young, my father taught film as literature at Skidmore College. So every Wednesday, he would bring home a big hexagonal box with 3 reels of a film. We would watch them on the living room wall, and then the next day we would show them to the kids. And every year it was the same sequence. It was one of the silent comedies, one of the silent melodramas, a Marx Brothers film, one of the 30s musicals, and so on through the decades, and then the 60s auteurs and so on. And one year I saw a Buster Keaton film and told him I thought I could do that. And he said, well, the great ones make it look effortless. And I was too young to understand what that meant. So I thought it meant that if it wasn't easy, you couldn't be great at something. And for years, when I was a stand-up comic, I was stoned all the time as part of my way of proving that it was easy for me. If I can do this stoned, you imagine how great I am at this. In the past few years, as I've reinvented myself as a storyteller and gave up pot about, I guess, 15, 20 years ago now, what I've really been doing is allowing myself to put all the effort in private. So that by the time I'm presenting, it looks effortless, it looks conversational, I can be in the moment, I can stay with the audience, I can respond to what's happening in the room.
Sure.
While knowing what the beats are that I'm getting through in the story or the show, if it's a longer form thing, which is exactly what you're talking about. That I seem to flow and change with the audience. I come back to something. I don't quite think of it that way.
Right.
I think of it as doing exactly the show I had planned and giving myself the freedom to live in the space of now.
Right. Like Olympians. That's what Olympians do. They make it look effortless. They have a set plan, and they just go with whatever's going on. If something happens, they adjust.
If there were a talking about yourself Olympic sport, I would win that.
Okay, another question. You didn't have to make a transition then from being a stand-up comic to a storyteller because you are a stand-up storyteller. Right?
No, it was a big transition for me. It was a big transition for me. First of all, there were about 10 years in between.
Okay.
During which I quit smoking pot, didn't know who I was, couldn't perform comedy because I didn't know who I was, and was just studying martial arts for about 10 years.
So you stopped doing stand-up comedy?
Yeah, almost entirely.
Okay.
Occasionally someone would call me and say, hey, can you host a thing? And I would show up and get a check, but very little.
Okay.
But here's the difference between stand-up and storytelling, and this took me a long while to get as a storyteller. As a stand-up comic, silence tells you you've gone off the path. You need to get them back. You need to get a laugh soon or you're going to lose them. And it took me a long time to retrain my habits to know that silence is gorgeous.
In storytelling.
In storytelling, silence is the audience listening and hanging on the words and picking up the nuance. And it means that when you get to a laugh, it's going to be bigger. And the warning sign is no longer silence. The warning sign is coughing and shuffling.
Do you write every day?
Almost.
Do you pull over to the side of the road when you get an idea?
No. I do write a lot in my car. But I will write and run a piece over and over again in my head as I'm driving, adding to it each time, so that by the time I get home, I've got whatever the chunk is pretty well set. I have a piece, if you want to hear a piece that I wrote in the car, I can do it for you.
Well, wait, what
Okay.
I want to ask you, I'd like to hear that piece, but what I want to know is, do you go home and type it up? Because you are a talker, a purveyor of words. So do you speak it into the
I
microphone ever?
type.
Do you tape it, or
I
you
write.
write it into the?
I type
do you,
it.
Do you type? Do you
No, I
on
do
a
it all at the
computer
computer.
right
I do it all
away?
at the computer.
So you don't do the
No.
okay.
When I started writing long before I started doing stand-up, and I wrote it at a typewriter because I'm that old. My handwriting is atrocious. A handwriting analyst looked at my handwriting and said I should be a doctor.
That'd be scary. I'm sorry. That'd be very scary. Dr. Dillon, you would just tell me what's wrong with me. You would just make it up. It would
yeah.
just sound
It's
convincing.
so much easier. No, I typed everything, and then when I got my first computer, I started writing on the computer, and it's the rhythm of it is very natural to me.
Okay.
And frequently what will happen is I will have a joke or a series of jokes, and when I start typing them, because one types, well, I type very fast, but even there one types marginally more slowly than one thinks and one speaks. So as I'm typing it, my brain is jumping ahead, and I'll wind up adding 2 or 3 beats or 2 or 3 new jokes to it as I go. But it forms in my head and then goes to the page.
Dylan Brody, thank you.
Thank you
very,
so much for
very,
having
very
me.
much. You've just finished you just shot a 3-show comedy special.
I shot 3 comedy specials in one night.
3 comedy specials in one night, yes.
And now I'm waiting to see the first edit of it and make sure that I've actually got what I think I've got. And there are actually 3 storytelling specials. It's become clear to me over the past several years that the people who buy comedy specials don't understand that there's room for long-form storytelling in the humorscape. And rather than trying to convince them of that, to get them to put up money so that I could make the thing, and then they could go, oh yeah, that works. I put up my own money, and I'm going to prove to them that it works. And
That was going to be my last question, but you just answered it. You don't wait for somebody. You're very proactive in your own career, in your own life. You send out newsletters. You send out the latest on. You write it from a third person. You do whatever it takes to catch the person's attention. You're constantly proactive in your own career.
the greatest mythology we are fed from childhood is that there is somebody out there waiting to discover us so that we don't have to do the work, and then our lives will be easy.
Right.
And those people don't exist. That is pure mythology. And until we all shatter our illusions and become disenchanted, we don't get to live happily ever after. If we want to make careers as artists, then we have to treat the art as a career. And it took a long time, and it was very difficult for me to learn this. But I think everybody should begin just living up to their greatest possible potential. And that means stepping into areas that are a little uncomfortable. How do I keep the books for myself? How do I sell the material so that it makes me a living, so that I can continue to do this thing that I enjoy doing instead of
Absolutely.
taking a day job?
Absolutely, I understand. Thank you for joining us on I Love a Good Story. Really appreciate it. Dylan Brody.
Thank you for
Lauri
having me, Lauri Fraser.
See ya.